Hello everyone, this is Jeremiah, W9JAM. I'm here in Cathedral City, California, and I'm going to try and show you guys where to get the correct software to flash the firmware on your MD380 or 390, the UV380, 390, the RT3, RT3S, and the RT8 radios made by Retevis. They're effectively the same radio. Prime example here. This is an MD UV380, or excuse me, 390, and this is I'm trying to do this where you can see the screens and everything. This right here is an RT8 made by Retevis. Only difference is this one is monoband, 400 to 480 megahertz. This one's the dual band. This is the UV390. This is the MD390. So, only difference is the bands and the firmware. So, that being said, put that back in the charger cradle over here. Almost had it. There we go. What we're going to do today is I'm going to go to the Retevis website because the TYT website isn't showing the latest firmware and stuff now for the UV390, MD390, UV380, MD380. Retevis actually is updating firmware and software. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the websites, show you where to get the firmware tool on the website so you can flash your firmware, and hopefully give you some guidance on how to recover your radio if you accidentally flashed it with MD tools and you have a UV series radio. MD380 tools is not compatible with the UV radios. It will brick the radio, but they are recoverable. So let's hop into it. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to, whoops, try that one more time. There we go. Here is the website that shows us the similarities between the two. RT3, MD380, RT8, MD390. The MD 2017 is the same as the RT82. The RT90 is the same as the MD960, which was the mobile radio to go in the car. And the RT3S is the same as the MD UV380 and UV390. So you can actually use the firmware for that on your UV390, which is what I did. So let's go over to the Retevis website, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to Products, Digital Mobile Radio, DMR Products, click there, and since I already have the firmware for the radios on my computer, I'm just going to show you which one to click on and what you need to click on to get to it. So this is the RT3S, this is the UV390. This one right here is. Make sure it says RT3S. There's two different versions of the firmware in there when you go to download the firmware, but the firmware tool is not in there. To get the firmware tool, you need to click on the RT8, go up here to Support, hit Firmware and Software, and make sure you install the RT3 and RT38 driver. It's the same driver for the TYT radios, exact same radios, just different names. Install that, and then click on RT8 firmware. It'll start downloading it. You see I've already downloaded it a couple of times from a few previous attempts at making this video that I got interrupted on. And we just open it up, extract the files, and you're going to see one that is a firmware folder, one that's a software folder. The software folder is the one that has the firmware download 3.04 file. Now, for that one, what we need to do is we need to go over to, since we've got those downloaded now, and I've already got it installed, run it as administrator. You want to make sure you run it as administrator. But what we're going to do is we will go over to that one. Make sure I've got my commands correct here. Yep. So, minimize that window, minimize that window. And I'm using OBS, as you can tell, but here's what we're going to do. I'm going to minimize OBS so you don't have to see all that. And while we're at it, we're just going to turn off all my desktop icons so you don't have to see all those. Now, user program, that is, or should say firmware file, but for whatever reason it doesn't. You're going to click Open File Upgrade, and since we're going to flash the RT8, and mine has GPS, we're going to look for the one that says S14.04. If you're doing a UV 380 or 390 or an RT3S, that one is going to say 19.06, and there's a few different versions of the firmware for that one. You need to look on the orange sticker on the back of your radio, which is this sticker right here under the battery, this one right here, and it'll tell you if your radio has GPS or not. It doesn't say GPS, it just has the IP67 water rating, then it doesn't have GPS, and you need to flash it with the one that doesn't have GPS listed in it. So, put the battery back on, fasten it back down, and since we're going to flash this radio with the firmware, this is also the same procedure to recover the radio if you flash the wrong firmware. Same procedure. So, radio's off, so we're going to hit the top and the PTT button. So your S1 and your PTT, I'll press and hold those in, turn on the radio, and now you should see the red and green light flashing. So now you're in DFU mode. Plug in your cable, which is what I'm going to do right now. And since mine has GPS, we're going to click that, click open, and download file of upgrade, and click OK. It's going to start writing the firmware to the radio. Now this process will take a couple of moments, and it's actually fairly quick compared to some of the other radios I've worked on, like the GD77 by Radioddity. I actually have a new radio that's coming, and it is one of the Anytone radios. So I'm probably going to make a video on how to convert my existing UV390 code plug over to the Anytone 878 radio. But the most common question I've gotten asked so far is, where can I get the cable? My cable broke. I lost my cable. Well, here's the good news. I'm going to test it and see if it works, and if it does, I will make a video with that cable. But I believe that the Anytone 878 cable is a non-chipped cable, which should be a straight COM port pass-through cable, which means you should be able to use it with your MD or UV series radios. I will test that tomorrow when I get the new radio and let you guys know. Oh, our firmware flash is done. So hit OK. Now something you're going to notice, we still have the red and green flashing light. The radio didn't reboot. Here's what you do to fix that. Turn off the radio, unplug the cable, turn your radio back on, and we should get a welcome screen. There's our tones, there's our welcome screen, and there we go. The radio's flashed with the firmware, and this is the same procedure if you bricked your radio because you flashed the wrong firmware to it. The only difference is you make sure you have the right firmware this time. So if you have any questions on the firmware, where to get it, or you're having trouble recovering a bricked radio, feel free to send me a message. You can also email me at W9JAM, that's Whiskey 9, Juliet Alpha Mike, at Outlook.com, and I will be glad to try and help you out with it. So that's it for now. Thank you guys, and 73s.